Well, in this chapter, I'm going to have a quick look at other recaptures after the line knight to e4, knight takes e4, and when black recaptures with the pawn, then the move knight d2. So let's just quickly go on to the main position so we can see what we're talking about. So if white just develops like normal, so we have this, bishop e7, knight f3, castles, d6, knight c3, knight e4. This is our main starting position, and now we're going to look at the line knight takes e4, and after f takes e4, knight d2. And in the last chapter, we actually had a look after the move pawn d5. So this is really the main line, pawn f3, and now knight c6. Remember, taking on c4 makes less sense with the knight on d2, but knight c6 targeting the unprotected d4 pawn. F takes e4, rook takes f1, a kind of key position really. We looked at knight takes f1, which I think is probably the most likely move you're going to face. And in this chapter, we're going to have a look at the other recaptures. So we're going to look at king takes, bishop takes, and queen takes f1, which are all kind of major variations really. So let's have a start with queen takes f1. After queen takes f1, I think it's a good time for black to take the pawn on d4, knight takes d4. And then after e takes d5, we've got this nice move, knight c2. Our knight is kind of hopping around white's position. Rook b1, knight e3. And then queen f3, we get to eliminate his strong bishop with the move knight takes g2. I think this should really be fine for black, because with that light square bishop gone, black should be quite happy. E takes d5. If I was white here, I'd probably be more tempted to play queen takes d5 check, and rather than risk keeping pieces on. For example, c takes d5, c6, and white just has to be very careful because this bishop is unopposed, and if it ever becomes active, you know, white could get into a lot of trouble. So after king takes g2, e takes d5, he might choose to play a bit safer. Queen takes d5 check, try to trade off the queens, and then after queen takes d5, c takes d5, black can actually play the move bishop d7, and he's going to follow up with pawn to c6 and trade off that pawn on d5. And white's still got some issues here. It's not so easy for him to develop his pieces. He has to really try and keep this bishop under control. Bishop could become very powerful in lots of positions. If the knight moves, you might be able to play bishop f5, bishop e4, this kind of thing. So yeah, I think this position is fine for black. So queen takes f1 is well met by the continuation knight takes d4. So instead, after rook takes f1 check, let's have a look at the other continuations. Bishop takes f1. This one's actually not so easy to deal with. So after move bishop takes f1, knight takes d4 is the main recommendation. If you're looking for something a bit tricky, I would suggest the move d takes e4. This could become a bit of a tricky line for white to deal with. So d takes e4, knight takes e4. We get our pawn back with the move queen takes d4 check, takes, knight takes. And really the kind of critical line here to put black under a bit of pressure is this move bishop to f4. And white's obviously targeting the c7 pawn and just slightly disrupting black. He wants to bring the rook into the game. He wants to activate before black gets to activate. So here, this is, as I say, a bit of a tricky sideline to play the move pawn to b6 here. Obviously, we've got ideas to maybe play c5 in some positions if we need to, but certainly bishop b7 is another big idea of b6. So the critical line goes bishop takes c7, bishop b7, and here actually the best move for white is probably to play bishop d6. If he finds bishop d6, he might be able to get a slight advantage. If, however, he plays knight d6 instead, which is, I guess, kind of more logical move, we can now continue knight c2, and here white has to find the move rook d1 probably. If he was to play something like rook c1, then that's actually going to lead to disaster for white, because after rook c1, we can actually play the move bishop g5, attacking the rook, and we're coming in for checkmate as well. So it's very, very strong for black. Instead of rook c1, if he plays rook d1, now another tricky move we could try here is the move rook c8. Again, setting a kind of basic trap that if he takes the rook, we just got bishop c5, and the king's going to get checkmated. Instead, after rook c8, if he plays knight takes b7, rook takes c7, knight d8. This knight's kind of slightly misplaced here. Bishop c5 check, king h1, knight e3, and black is very active in this situation. So knight takes. We can even go into this endgame here. 2 pawns down, but then we win the b2 pawn, and yeah, opposite kind of bishops should be okay for black. White has a nominal advantage, I'd say, here. So again, yeah, this is based on this move d takes e4, which has got some venom to it, and certainly gives white a lot to think about. So instead of let's see, d takes e4 in this position, so d takes e4, the move we're going to actually recommend to try to equalise is the move knight takes d4. So d takes e4, got a few tricks to it, got some little checkmating tricks you might be able to work with, but probably knight takes d4 is objectively stronger. And now the two moves we looked at here, first of all e3, now we've got this nice move here, d takes e4. If white takes on d4 will be a mistake, because we can play queen takes d4 check, king somewhere, say king h1, and e3, and the fact white's in trouble here, he's going to lose the knight, and black's got a better position. So instead, after d takes e4, we're going to actually look at knight takes e4, and in this position, black could play the move knight f5, and probably it's about equal if queen takes d8 check, bishop takes d8, roughly equal position. So e3 is not really anything to worry about. Instead, white should probably look at c takes d5. So c takes d5, e takes d5, knight b3, and here we can just play knight takes b3, queen takes b3, and probably bishop e6 is simplest, just simply defending the pawn. Bishop g2, putting more pressure on this pawn, which is pinned, so we have to defend it with c6. We don't want to lose that pawn for nothing. And then queen takes b7, d takes e4. I mean, the position is very close. I mean, obviously it's equal in material. White's king could come under pressure. If white makes a bad move somewhere, black could get a very, very strong attack. So white has to be very careful here. In fact, his probably best option is to come up with a rather remarkable move, bishop h6, which is setting a little bit of a trap that if you take that bishop, so I think I missed out a check. I've unfortunately missed out the check. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Yeah. Rather than playing c6 after the move bishop g2, first bishop c5 check. Apologies for missing that one out. King h1 and then c6. Because I just thought that the taxi didn't work there. I was like, yeah, that's not the line that I looked at in the notes. Queen takes b7, d takes e4. Now bishop h6 does work. Rather a sneaky trick, which probably not many people are going to be able to spot. The main point being after g takes h6, bishop takes e4, and this actually is quite a dangerous attacking position for white. He's obviously threatening queen takes h7, rook f1, all these kind of things. So this is something to be avoided. Instead, after bishop h6, black can simply defend with bishop f8, and then white's going to have to move the bishop again. So bishop f8, bishop f4, say, and then bishop d5. With a more or less equal position, black might try to swap off the queens with queen c8. So yeah, I think this line with knight takes d4 seems to equalise. Obviously after bishop takes f1. So knight takes d4 seems to equalise, and d takes e4 is maybe not quite equalising, but does give you some tricks to play with. So they're the sort of two main kind of alternatives to knight takes f1, apart from the move king takes f1, which is the main kind of focus of this chapter. So have a quick look at king takes f1. Okay, after king takes f1, this line actually is quite hard to sort of equalise in, I have to be honest with you. D takes c4 is one possibility. Now knight to f3. If white continues with e3, this is another option. We could play knight a5 potentially. Queen A4 and C5, and try to get pressure that way. Then if knight takes C4, knight C6. D5 is probably the strongest move in this position. And, B5 is the novelty which we came up with, which is an improvement over Fleer's analysis, Grandmaster Glenn Fleer, who analysed the move knight b4. The idea of b5 is after queen takes b5, knight b4, we've got a much stronger version, and we're now threatening bishop a6, and certainly putting some pressure on white's position. So this is the main idea of this b5 move. Queen a4, bishop a6, king g1. We get to take the knight off, and after a3, e takes d5, a takes b4, d takes e4, b takes c5. Black can play with queen d3 with a roughly equal game. In fact, black's very active here as well, so probably you'd rather be black, to be honest with you. It seems like a much easier position for black to play. You're threatening to maybe rook f8 and rook f1 or something like this. So yeah, it looks very comfortable. Okay, so let's go back to the main idea then. After d takes e4, knight to f3, now we're going to recommend the move pawn to b5. This is a move that I think Grandmaster Simon Williams has previously suggested, but I still think it's the best one in this position. So b5, again a4 we're playing b4, it's going to actually transpose into the game. So bishop e3, and now the move queen e8. So queen e8's a move where we're looking to maybe develop our bishop, try to get a rook to d8. We might be able to bring the queen out to the king side. So I think after queen e8, if white plays something like king g1, for example, then we can play bishop b7. Now we're in time, and we're going to just bring the rook to d8, and then if we get the rook to d8, I think we're quite happy as black. So after queen e8, probably the critical move, or almost certainly the critical move here, is for white to play d5 before the black rook is able to land on d8. Against d5, I think knight b4 is black's best attempt. Black's hoping to develop the move bishop to b7, and then if a3, white has found a lot of accurate moves here to put black under pressure. Knight a6, a4, b4 is probably not as much of a problem as a4. Some people suggesting b4, but I don't think it's a big problem. We can play either king h8 if we want to go for a win, or potentially this move bishop to b7, and then after bishop to h3 takes bishop check, king h8, knight e5, and this is going to land us in a sort of repetition of moves here actually. Bishop f6, knight f7 check, king g8, e takes d5, king f8, knight g5, and then queen g6 with a roughly equal position. So after the move queen e8, king g1, we're firing bishop b7. So d5 is really the critical move, and after d5 we're looking at the move knight to b4, a3, knight to a6. So again, if white now plays b4, we can probably try and play bishop b7, or if we're keen to sort of play one for the win, we can look at the move king h8 first to stop any of this bishop h3, bishop e6 type of ideas, and then go for bishop e7 on the next move. Instead of that, though, after knight back to a6, white could play the move pawn a4, trying to weaken black's pawn structure. And here, I think knight to b4 might be the most accurate. We're kind of sacrificing the pawn structure, but trying to stay active. Then if white plays, for example, a takes b5 here, we can take on d5. This is our main idea, taking on d5, and then playing bishop b7. If white plays knight d4, then bishop c5 is quite a nice move to try and put him in a pin, and that might be quite useful for black in some variations. So finally, we're going to have a look at the move d takes e6. So d takes e6. Okay, after d takes e6, I'm going to recommend a5, just to secure things on the queen side. Bishop takes e6 is okay, but then after a takes b5, things are still quite messy. So probably it's safer just to play a5 straight away. Now, white's got two options here that we looked at. A takes b5, a very logical one, or the other option is to try and play knight d4. I think here after knight d4, bishop c5 is really worth recommending. Then if a takes b5, we simply respond with bishop takes e6, queen c1, bishop takes, and queen takes b5. And it looks kind of more or less okay for black. I guess white might be a tiny bit better, but I think black is doing fine here. So moving back to the move a5, if instead of playing knight d4, white decides to play the move a takes b5, and remember we're a long way away from kind of well-trodden theory here, so chances are not that high of you getting this far. Your opponent probably make a mistake before this. Now black can play bishop takes e6, and suddenly it feels like black is kind of back in the game here. Knight d4, bishop c5, and possibly white is slightly better, but not by much. So I think that in summary, this line is quite sharp, quite hard to be precise against. There are a few interesting variations. Just quickly go back to the start of the chapter. Just to remind you of the move order. After you play knight e4, white plays knight takes e4, f takes e4, knight d2, the most common move, d5, f3, again challenging center straight away. Remember now we play knight c6 because the white knight's on d2, f takes e4, we always take the rook on f1 to try and inconvenience white. And then king takes f1 looks quite critical, quite hard to completely equalise against. But we're given some good ideas, I think, with the move d takes c4 and then b5, and potentially following up with queen e8. So king takes f1, queen takes f1 was okay for black because he could play the move knight takes d4, and then the knight went to c2 and back to e3, so that was fine. And instead of queen takes f1, the final one, bishop takes f1, we're able to then continue with either the tricky sideline with d takes e4 with some of the checkmating ideas, or if you want to play a little bit safer, knight takes d4 seems to be quite a safe way to continue. So I think in summary, this line is dangerous, especially the king takes f1 lines, but it feels as though in most variations black is holding his own.